What's up, everyone? Bales here with another one of our MLB DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Tuesday, September 28th. After a weird slate yesterday where we had, I believe, 3 early games, 2 later games, we're back to 13 games for the main slate tonight. A lot of pitching options, a lot really to go over. A few really solid stacks that I feel stand above the rest. So we have plenty to get to on this 13 game slate. As always, if you enjoy the video, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. You can turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of our stuff by clicking the little bell. And leave any questions or comments you have below in the comment section. If you want all of our free content, this goes for all sports, NFL, we start dropping stuff on, I guess Tuesday. I guess today will be the first day that we drop anything, and then more DFS stuff comes Wednesday, Thursday throughout the week. DFSkarma.com for everything sports betting you need, betkarma.com. I believe this is the last week of MLB. Sunday will be the last regular season slate. Then we obviously have playoffs, so you can still pick up our core plays package. Also for NFL, Ben has been killing it with the optimal 3-0 on the season, so you can pick up a package for that as well. If you want all sports, it's called MVP. If not, just choose your sport. That also can be found on dfskarma.com, or if you just go below in the description here, you can find the links to everything that you could possibly need, including our projections, which are done by Sam, and he has done an outstanding job. Prior to getting into everything, I do want to quick shout out Jock Market. We have partnered with them. Essentially, fantasy sports or DFS meets the stock market. You buy shares of players depending on how they do on that slate compared to the rest of the field. You will get paid out. Very hard app to lose all your money. Relatively easy app to win some money, though. So I would highly recommend just download Jock Market, JOCKMKT. Use the promo code KARMA to get a 100% deposit bonus up to $50. Get in our Discord. You can go to chatdfs.com for that, or you can find the link in the description below, or just head to dfskarma.com and you'll find it on the site as well. 100% free. We give out Jock Market advice and everything for that. So now that we kind of got all that out of the way, let's get into the slate, which is a relatively weird slate, in my opinion. We have a lot of good pitching up top, and then we have a lot of serviceable pitching in the middle. And then when you look at the bad pitchers, most of them get good matchups. So it's just kind of a weird slate where you don't have that many things that stick out in terms of hitting, but for pitching, I mean, it's really good. I think the number one option that you're looking at tonight, it has to be for his price, Logan Webb. Ridiculously priced on FanDuel or on DraftKings, also relatively poorly priced on FanDuel for how well he's throwing. 2.82 xFIP on the season. His strikeout rate's over 25%. He gets a matchup against the Arizona Diamondbacks, who already struggle away from home. And then over the last 14 days, team WOBA of 285, strikeout rate right around 25%, which is not the highest or anything on the slate, but I believe it's top 5 or 6 on the entire slate. So just a really good matchup for Logan Webb. If you want to look at his Vegas line, he's basically a minus 270 favorite in a game set of 8 runs. Arguably the best line on the entire slate. He has struggled, I guess, a little bit in recent games, but this is just something that you completely overlook for the $8,900 price tag. I mean, he should be around $10,000 tonight. He was recently $10,000 against the Atlanta Braves, and he dropped 26. He has 30-plus fantasy point upside. He's thrown significantly better at home than on the road. It just all adds up for a great Logan Webb game. After that, you kind of need to decide what you want to do. There are several pitchers that you can at least make the case for, just because they're relatively cheap. The one that sticks out the most to me, most likely, would be Chris Sale. Basically a little over a minus 250 favorite. The game is set at 9 runs, but gets the matchup against Baltimore. The big thing is over the last 14 days, Baltimore 286 team WOBA and just a massive 28.1% strikeout rate. That is the highest on the slate. When you look at Chris Sale, his strikeout rate's dipped a little compared to some of the other elite options. Sales is at 26.4, so just for comparison, Zach Wheeler 29.2, Brandon Woodruff 30.2, Charlie Morton 29.2, or I guess that's Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish 29.2, Charlie Morton 28.2. So Chris Sale a little bit below that, but the matchup against Baltimore should make up for it. I think if you forced me into picking two pitchers at this very moment, I'd probably go Chris Sale, Logan Webb. I think that Walker Buehler for 9-1 is too cheap. The only thing I don't like is the matchup against San Diego, who hasn't been striking out at all over the last 14 days. I do think that Zach Wheeler is 100% fine, and there is strikeout upside in that game. On the other side, you have Charlie Morton, who I'm 100% okay with at 9,200. You can use either side of the Brandon Woodruff, Adam Wainwright game. I think that's outstanding. If Chris Bassett wasn't on a pitch count, I would think that he's one of the better pitchers on the entire slate as well, but I wouldn't expect him to throw more than max like 75 pitches tonight, and I think even that's pushing it. So Chris Bassett's probably a guy that I avoid. If you have to drop down and go with a lower priced guy, Reynaldo Lopez at 7,300 against Cincinnati is just a little bit too cheap. I think you can also play someone like Yusei Kikuchi. Outside of that, we have some really bad pitchers in really good matchups. So if you want to take your shot there, I don't think you should on this type of a slate, but I will just say them anyway. AJ Alexy and Packy Naughton get matchups against each other. They're both very bad. All their advanced metrics are bad, but they both get good matchups against offenses that aren't hitting well. Tyler Alexander, his advanced metrics are really bad, but he gets a little bit more strikeout upside against the Minnesota Twins, who have been striking out over 25% over the last 14 days. Assuming Charlie Barnes starts for Minnesota, he obviously gets the matchup against Detroit, who's been struggling, but again, not pitchers that I really want to use. Do they come with a little bit of upside for their price? Yeah, sure. I just think with all the elite arms, and because there's so many elite arms and the ownership's likely to condense to only a few of them, you're going to get really good pitchers in at least decent matchups for significantly lower ownership than you probably should. So I think that's more or less where you want to head on this slate. And then if you're like really need the salary relief, I think you probably just drop down to Reynaldo Lopez and take the upside at 7,300. I think that about does it for pitcher. If there's anyone that you like tonight that I didn't go over, drop them in the comments. I will respond basically to anything as long as you're asking a question, or even just say the player's name and I'll let you know what I think of them. But I think that about does it for pitcher. We can move on to stacks. I guess the number one stack has to be Colorado. They get a matchup against Patrick Corbin, who's really bad. I think either side of that game is reasonable with Kyle Freeland on the mound, but Freeland surprisingly hasn't been that bad. His xFIP is only slightly over 4, whereas I guess Patrick Corbin's is relatively similar. But the big difference between the two is just that Colorado is obviously a significantly better offense in Coors, as any offense will be better in that type of game environment. But Washington, the more I think about it, the more Washington just makes a sneaky stack. It's not like Freeland can't stop home runs. Washington's been playing well. If everyone's going Corbin, or I guess if everyone's going Colorado against Corbin, I feel that's completely fine in cash games. But I feel like at that point, you might just want to make a Washington stack as leverage, because they very well could win this game and score quite a few points. I think outside of that, it's relatively obvious that Boston is the next stack. Bruce Zimmerman's coming back. Bruce Zimmerman, we know, isn't a really good pitcher. He struggles with home runs. He probably doesn't throw deep into this game anyway. And if that's the case, they get a lot of innings against a really bad Baltimore bullpen. Boston's been arguably the hottest offense in the MLB over the last 14 days. And they'll be playing in Baltimore, which is a hitter-friendly stadium. I always prefer the Red Sox in Boston, but they're moving to another hitter-friendly stadium, so I'm not going to knock them for that or anything. And then I think that those three offenses, really Colorado, Boston, Washington, are relatively well ahead of everyone else. You can then start taking your shots. The other two that I like are the Chicago White Sox and San Francisco Giants. Outside of that, it's a pretty tough spot whether you want to attack a bad pitcher like AJ Alexy, but then you obviously have to use the Los Angeles Angels lineup. Same on the other side for someone like Packy Naughton in Texas. I think it's pretty clear cut. The three top stacks, Colorado, Boston, Washington. The two after that probably go overlooked, White Sox and Giants. And that's probably about where I'm sitting on stacks. I feel those five are significantly better than anyone else, and we'll kind of have to see as the day goes on, just because there's a bit of rough weather, and we're going to have to monitor wind and everything like that. But I do think that for me, probably you either go Coors or Boston specifically in cash. Along with the pitchers, so you're just going to have to make the pricing work. But we can get on with that in the position by position. It's probably going to be one of those nights where Colorado seems pretty clear cut. I mean, you have Elias Diaz at 3,800. That's too cheap for a matchup against a lefty and Patrick Corbin there. If you need to save a bit of salary, Christian Vasquez is only 3,000. And then if you really want to save, Jose Trevino is 2,200 against a lefty. I think that probably about does it. Riley Adams, assuming he's starting in the lineup, obviously can be used in the Coors game. I can't get that out. For only 3,200. And then if you do want to spend up, my top option would have to be Yasmani Grandal at 4,800. But feels like you're probably just going to save as much money as you can at catcher, whether you're choosing between the Coors guys or if you're dropping all the way down to someone like Jose Trevino. I think any of those options are fine. At first base, you are very clear-cut what you're doing here. CJ Cron is 3,600 against a bad left-handed pitcher in Colorado. You play him in cash games. You probably play him in tournaments. You can pivot in GPPs. Do not pivot in cash. CJ Cron is the cash option. You play him in cash and you move on. In tournaments, I think you're sticking, just because of the case of this being CJ Cron is going to get massive ownership. I think you're sticking in the top games for this. Bobby Dahlbeck's 3,100. That's way too cheap for him against a lefty that struggles with home runs. Yasmani Grandal can be considered here. Jose Abreu. And then you have the guys in Coors on the other side, which is Josh Bell and Ryan Zimmerman. Also, if you just need someone super cheap, Colton Welker is expected to start and hit 8th. He's 2,200, has first base eligibility as well. And that's probably my full pool. I think for me, it probably has to be CJ Cron is well ahead of everyone else. Then I like someone like Bobby Dahlbeck, probably Ryan Zimmerman after that. And then if you want to get weird in tournaments because he's only 100 more than Zimmerman, people won't play him. It'll be Jose Abreu. Although I think if you can get to Josh Bell, completely feel free. Moving to second base, again, you have the Colorado guys way too cheap. Brendan Rodgers at 3,900. I mean, it's a pretty easy plug and play. I think if you want to go Garcia at 3,400 against Freeland, that's completely fine. The other option would be Tommy La Stella at 3,800 leading off against Luke Weaver in a bad Arizona bullpen. That's probably about where you're sitting at this point. I think if you want to take some other shots, you can. Yoni Hernandez is priced up. Literally no one will use him. Whit Merrifield at 4,700. You can even go to like Josh Harrison at 42 in a good matchup. Jorge Polanco. But more or less, I mean, you're probably playing Brendan Rodgers in cash. And then if you want to shift off of him, Tommy La Stella makes sense as another cheaper option. Moving to third base, this is kind of where it gets a little bit interesting. There are options to use. I think you can use Carter Kaiboom at 3,500. That's way too cheap. But if you don't want to pay down, or I guess if you don't want to play someone hitting late in the lineup, there are going to be other options that you can at least consider. Rafael Devers is under 5,000. I know he gets the initial matchup against Zimmerman, who's a lefty, but he's going to see plenty of the Baltimore bullpen, so I wouldn't write off Devers just because he's starting against a left-handed pitcher. I think that he's 100% viable for all leagues tonight. DJ LeMahieu at 4-1 is too cheap. Colton Welker, we already talked about at 2,200. Yoni Hernandez also. Wilmer Flores at 25 against Luke Weaver, and Arizona's bullpen kind of sticks out. If you can spend up, I don't have any issues with Chris Bryant or Alex Bregman. It's just I prefer Devers, who's cheaper than both of them. And then in the mid-tier at 4K, you have Yoan Moncada in a good matchup. So I think that's 100% fine as well. A few more plays that I do like here that I think are relatively fine. Josh Donaldson at 4,300. If you can get up to Jose Ramirez at 59, I have no issues with that as well. So plenty of options at third base, which usually is a position that I don't necessarily love. At shortstop, I mean, he's not priced as poorly as he was a little bit ago. But Trevor Story at 4,600, I think, is the very clear-cut chalk option. I don't know why you kind of avoid him at that price. You have Alcides Escobar on the other side, who's up at 52, so he got the price bump. But Story at home against a bad left-handed pitcher doesn't get the price bump. So kind of weird. I think that Escobar's fine. I probably prefer Tim Anderson to him, though, and probably prefer to both of them, Xander Bogaerts. So I think that all three of them, along with Story, can be used. Then, again, we're sticking more towards the top of shortstop here. Brandon Crawford at 5-1 if you want to get a little bit weird. If you need to save a bit of money, you probably drop down to Nicky Lopez or Ahmed Rosario. Both of them are completely fine. Isaiah Kinner-Falefa at 3,400 is significantly cheaper as well and can be used. Shortstop is probably a position that I try to spend up on if possible, though. So that's probably where I'm sitting at with that. In the outfield, I mean, the Colorado guys, very obvious. Sam Hilliard's 2,500. Raimel Tapia, assuming he is leading off, which he should be, is 34. Charlie Blackmon's up to 45. Even Juan Soto seems a little underpriced at 5,900. I feel like he should be 6K plus on this slate. Then you have Josh Bell with outfield eligibility at 53. No problems there. Lane Thomas, just a ridiculous price tag down at 41. I 100% love him tonight. I think he's one of the better plays on the slate. Outside of that, we have like the Boston guys I think are relatively obvious. Kike Hernandez, JD Martinez, they're just too cheap. Hunter Renfroe, also, he's basically the same price, expected to hit second in the lineup. So all of them, Colorado, Washington, Boston, are very clear-cut, easy options if you want to use. I think you can also use the White Sox guys. If you need to save money, Brandon Marsh is 2,200. He continues to lead off for the Angels, obviously gets the good matchup against Alexi. So I have no issues whatsoever there. Alex Verdugo, even at 3,100, I think just getting a piece of that offense in a similar way that I said with Devers, that he's going to go overlooked probably because he gets the initial matchup against the lefty. Alex Verdugo also could go overlooked hitting later in the lineup against the left-handed pitcher, but we'll get plenty of the Baltimore bullpen, which obviously is something that we want to attack. If there's anyone else that I didn't mention, because there's other good plays as well, if there's anyone else that I didn't mention that you would like to know about, any position, pitcher, anything, stacks, it doesn't matter, just go ahead and mention that in the comments. I guess it's time for the home run call. We have been absolutely killing with these. It's kind of ridiculous how well it's been going, but I guess tonight it comes down between two guys, I think. All right, there's multiple guys I like. I'm going to go with Franmil Reyes, though. Franmil Reyes is the one that stuck out the most initially to me. I don't necessarily love the matchup against Brady Singer, who doesn't give up a ton of home runs. So I do think that there is a little bit of risk involved in that. But I'm going to stick with Franmil Reyes. That is the guy that pops out. He is my home run call. We'll see what happens with that. Once again, you can find all of our content at dfskarma.com along with our core plays, or just check in the description. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content. Give us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Everything along those lines. Subscribe to the channel. And good luck tonight. Hopefully your screens are filled with green.